Hello, everybody. My name is Dan Skipbound, and this is the Top 5 Weekly, where we take a director, an actor, an actress, a genre, a topic, whatever it may be, and my cohorts in crime, we run down that topic from 5 to 1, and that is the show every week. So, once again, let's introduce our panelists, Mr. Andrew Cabral.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here. I know we didn't really have a topic last week at the end of the show for this week, but we're going with Michael Keaton in honor of Spider-Man: Homecoming, and just because he's Michael Keaton, we might as well talk about him since he's in this movie. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting list because as much as I'm familiar with Michael Keaton, I haven't seen a lot of his films. Not a lot of his backlog, so this is going to be an interesting list for me personally. I don't know about for you guys.
And Steven Billings.
Hello, guys. As you can see, we have these fancy lower thirds right here that say everything we're trying to say right now. But, yeah, I'm on the red team. It's just like the dark side. But, yeah, Michael Keaton, I like it when he goes to the dark side, and it's some of my favorite stuff. So we'll get into that. Team Keaton.
Yeah, Michael Keaton. He can sometimes be a bad guy. He can sometimes be a good guy, and he can be funny sometimes. So we'll see what films in his filmography resonated with these two gentlemen, and let's get it started. Mr. Andrew Cabral, you are up first, my friend.
Ooh, goody. My number 5 is a film that may not be on a lot of people's lists. Excuse me. But I thought that I would just include it on mine just to spotlight it. And that is an early film in his career called Nightshift, directed by Ron Howard, starring, of course, Michael Keaton, but also Henry Winkler and Shelley Long. And it's a comedy. And the premise of this film is essentially that Henry Winkler works in a morgue, and he ends up turning the morgue into kind of a brothel / party place. It's a really great comedy of wildness and stuff, and excuse me, Michael Keaton is really funny. It kind of plays like his best friend who's kind of getting him into all kind of shenanigans that Henry Winkler's character is really reluctant to do, but it is kind of nice to go back in time and see where Michael Keaton got his roots, and that is in comedy. A lot of people probably don't know that, so I thought I would include it on this list, but yet again, it probably won't be on many people's lists. But also, it's a film by Ron Howard, and I've always liked Ron Howard, so I thought I would spotlight this film.
Great choice, Andrew. Great choice. All right, Steven, what is your number 5?
All right, well, this is one that this is kind of the one that I was really excited to talk about, because I'm not sure that this is going to be on anybody's list either, but it might be. Dan might have it. I'm not sure. I think I've talked about this movie before, like off camera, and said that I don't think Andrew's seen it, but it's called Desperate Measures, and it's got Andy Garcia, Michael Keaton, and basically it's a movie about Andy Garcia plays this cop, and his son is very sick, and he needs a bone marrow transplant, and it's a very sudden thing. His son's dying, so the closest donor they could find is Michael Keaton's character, who is a murderer. He is a guy in prison, and he comes in, talks to him, and says, "Hey, will you do this for my son? Will you give me your bone marrow?" And he decides to do it. But of course, it's really just an opportunity for him to try to escape. They send him into a hospital, and then it becomes chaos. It's a big escape movie. Cops are like shooting up the place. It's an awesome movie. It's one of the movies in the 90s that kind of gets overlooked, I think. I try to go on Amazon to buy it, and it's one of the movies I was almost scared it wasn't even on DVD. But I do want to buy it. It's a really cool movie, and you get to see Michael Keaton play that bad guy, but that likable bad guy. You want to like him because he's like nice to the kid, but he's also trying to escape, and it's got a great ending too. So yeah, Desperate Measures is kind of a hidden gem for me personally that you guys got to check out. So yeah.
All right, that's I will definitely have to check that one out. When did it come out, Steven? Do you remember the
1998.
1998. Okay, yeah, I vaguely remember it, but 1998. you know, I don't remember a whole lot from back in 1998.
You know what's weird? Well, yeah, you did a lot of drugs. We heard about all that background check stuff, Dan. But but it's one of the movies that like my parents showed me, like going through the VHS collection. Like my parents didn't really control a lot of what I watched. This was one of the movies in their VHS collection that I watched a lot. Like it's a weird one. That one, Point Break, you know, stuff like that. I shouldn't have been watching it, but I was watching it.
Well, good for you then. All right, so my number 5 is a little film that, you know, I have a bittersweet memory of. I just absolutely love this film, but the subject matter of the film brings back such sad memories for me. And that's the name of the film is called Game 6. And Michael Keaton plays Nicky, and Nicky is a playwright, but he's also a fan of the Boston Red Sox. And this is the day that his newest play is going to be introduced on Broadway. And Robert Downey Jr. plays a film critic, a play critic, a critic. And he writes scathing reviews for all these plays because he's just not a nice guy. He's just such a lonely guy. And he plays a character by the name of Steven Schwimmer, by the way, Steven Schwimmer. And so this goes through the life of these two men during this day. And of course, we deal with Nicky's failing relationship with his wife and his daughter, you know, and then some side relationships. And then it's got this like confessions of a taxi cab, a New York taxi cab thing going on with it as well, where he's in these taxi cabs talking to all these different cab drivers because, you know, nobody drives their own car in New York. They either walk, take a train, or ride in a taxi. So, but the overlying story is this. Nicky ends up in a bar that's basically empty with this cab driver and her son. It's a black woman, and her son, and they're just talking to him about his day and his life and the Red Sox and the Mets and so forth. And eventually, as the game goes on, Game 6, I might add, of the 1986 World Series, the bar fills up with Mets fans, and Nicky is sitting there watching on the TV with all of these Mets fans what happens in 1986. And then something happens afterwards in the movie, which I'm not going to really give away because I recommend this movie tremendously. And I'll tell you what, God almighty, if you have not seen Game 6, Michael Keaton is fantastic. This is an era where Michael Keaton wasn't doing a whole lot. 2006, he really wasn't doing a lot. He did a lot in the early 80s and the 80s. And then last 2 or 3 years, he's been doing quite a bit. But 2006, this is the first, he hadn't really done a lot. But this movie, if you're a sports fan, I recommend it. But if you're a fan of two of our best actors, you know, in this kind of era, Michael Keaton and Robert Downey Jr., this is a good movie for you to see these two guys acting opposite each other. So I have Game 6 as my number 5 film for Michael Keaton. All right, Andrew, going back to you for number 4.
Yes. My number 4 is not a film that he was typically the star of. He played more of a supportive role in, and that is the film Jackie Brown, where he plays a police officer named Ray Nicolette, and he is working along with Pam Grier's character, who's kind of this go-between money launderer, drug runner, etc. for the why am I blanking on his name?
Sam Jackson.
Sam Jackson character. But throughout the film, you can definitely tell that his personal feelings towards the Pam Grier character is kind of getting in the way of his police work, if you will. And again, it's a small role, but he does permeate throughout the film, and he's very much involved in the main plot. If you're familiar with Tarantino's films, specifically back in the 90s, there's a lot of plot things happening in the film. There's characters doing a lot of things, affecting different outcomes, if you will. But I've always liked Michael Keaton in this role, also because he actually reprised this role in another film, the film that Steven Soderbergh directed that I can't remember right now. I'm going to look it up because I can't remember it now. I'm going to do it because I'm blanking tonight, and I know that Steven's actually seen this film, and you know,
This is pitiful.
pitiful. This is not what cinephiles do.
Dead air. Dead air.
Dead air, Steven.
What's going on? All right, let's skip Andrew. Go to
Yeah,
Steven.
skip me.
All right. All right. Well, my number 4, this one might be a little controversial, that it's not as high on my list because it's kind of one of his big-time roles that people know him for, and that is 1989's Batman. You know, you know, this is one of the movies I grew up once again watching a lot of, but obviously this was not my Batman. My Batman has kind of been a mixture of Val Kilmer and more recently Christian Bale. So them are the Batmans I like a lot. And for me, as much as I love Keaton in the 89 Batman, he is not my particular favorite Batman. This dude's not a big dude. This dude's like 5'5". Like he's not really the Batman, but it's a great movie. It's still a really good movie. He plays a really cool different type of Batman that worked for that movie. And you know, of course, he's got some great lines and great moments. And, you know, let's get nuts, you know, stuff like that, you know, and of course, Jack Nicholson, the Joker, you know, is great, you know, and I think he's a great Bruce Wayne. I think he can do the Bruce Wayne pretty well. It's the Batman part that bothers me a little bit. But other than that, man, you can't argue. It was a groundbreaking film for its time. And it was the second collaboration with Tim Burton, technically. So, because he'd done Beetlejuice the year before. And then, of course, he does Batman Returns, I think, a couple years later. So him and Tim Burton like to work together. They're both like to do crazy things, play crazy characters. I'd like to see them team back up, whether it's in another Beetlejuice movie or something else. I'd love to see Tim Burton and Michael Keaton hang back up together and do something cool. So that's it. My number 4 is Batman.
Okay.
Oh, the film I was talking about was Out of Sight, where he reprises the character. That because both Jackie Brown and Out of Sight were both movies based on books written by the same author. So I wanted to clear that up. But yes, that's my number 4 pick was Jackie Brown.
All right, good for you, Andrew. Glad you were able to straighten that out for our viewers out there. And Michael, Steven, I should say, I believe Michael Keaton has signed on to be the villain in Dumbo. Don't quote me on that, Steven, but I believe he has signed on to be the villain in Dumbo after, I think,
Will Smith.
Will Smith dropped out. Yeah, Will Smith dropped out of the role. And so we get to see Tim Burton and Michael Keaton back together again. What? All right, that's Brady, Andrew's dog barking. But
yeah, just ignore it. This is an off night, people. This is an off night. It's a real off night.
I'm going to try to talk over Andrew's good dog. I have not met Andrew's dog, but I'm sure it's a good dog, and one day I'll hopefully meet Brady.
Yeah. I'm just going to go on screen now and movie magic time.
All right.
Distract him, Dan. Distract him.
I will. My number 4 is a little film called Spotlight. Michael Keaton plays a character. I have to look at my notes because I do not have this memorized. I apologize. Michael Keaton plays a character named Walter Robbie Robinson. And he was basically a kind of an editor type of guy for the Boston Globe in the early 2000s, around 2001. And a huge scandal broke out. And it's not 9/11. I'm thinking, you're probably thinking, oh, 9/11. No, it's not 9/11. It's the Boston Catholic Diocese priest controversy with having sex with little boys. sexual relations with their altar boys. And this is a film documenting this entire story that paralleled 9/11. If you did not know this, this story paralleled 9/11 at the same exact time. While you're hearing all the stuff going on in 9/11 and CNN and all these news channels, this was actually in newspapers all around the country, but specifically the people that broke it. They did 500 articles based on this storyline in the Boston Globe, but it got overshadowed by 9/11. No, I mean, it's not saying it should be overshadowed, but 9/11 was a big deal. So we're just going to leave it at that. It also stars Rachel McAdams, Mark Ruffalo, Stanley Tucci. It won Best Picture in 2015, the Best Picture Oscar, beating The Revenant, which everybody thought The Revenant was going to win the Oscar that year, and Spotlight ended up winning. It was directed by Tom McCarthy. Also stars Billy Crudup. I mean, just so many great. Brian Darcy, James, John Slattery. I mean, it's so many great character actors that are in this film. And it's a film. Michael Keaton has a small role in the film, not a big role, but he is one of the integral characters in the film as Walter Robbie Robinson. But it's an ensemble piece where all the actors combine to make such a great film. And when you're sitting there in the theater and you're listening to this stuff that's going on and how these guys are using their reporting skills to uncover this story, your jaw is just dropping. The more you go into this film and more little pieces of this story get broken, you're just shocked. And I will say this: I actually went to the Boston Catholic Diocese when I was a child. I'm from Lowell, Massachusetts, and I actually went to Catholic school. I don't know if my town of Lowell and my priests in my Catholic school of St. Patrick's were involved in this. I do not know. But this was an eye-opening experience for me, and I know it was an eye-opening experience for a lot of people, knowing this was something that was going on in our backyards of a place that I love, and I dearly, dearly love Boston, Massachusetts. And I'm not a practicing Catholic, but I do believe in Catholicism. I do believe in the Catholic Church. So this is a very hard thing for me to swallow when I was watching this movie. It was such a sad story to see happen. But these guys, Michael Keaton is phenomenal. He deserved an Oscar nomination. How he did not get an Oscar nomination for this, I don't know. He's only been nominated for one Oscar his entire career, and I'm shocked that this was not a movie that he got nominated for. He was really good as Walter Robbie Robinson. So I had Spotlight as my number 4 on my top 5 Michael Keaton. And let's go to Andrew, who's going to give a brief synopsis of what his thoughts are of Spider-Man Homecoming.
Oh, Spider-Man Homecoming is the newest film in the ever-growing MCU. I believe it's number 16, which is very interesting that Iron Man plays a role in this film, considering he is the original film kind of establishing this world, in mostly establishing this world. And this film is really, this is a good Spider-Man film. It's also a good MCU film. It fits perfectly within the MCU framework. They really do a great job of enveloping it into the overall framework. Tom Holland is a really good Peter Parker as well as a Spider-Man. He does well in balancing his role as both teenager with teenage angsty type problems, as well as superhero Spider-Man who has his own set of problems. And it's nice to see the film be a character piece about him battling what to do with his life. And he's a teenager, so he would have to be kind of making those struggles almost naturally anyway. So it's a really good film from that perspective. And also, Michael Keaton as the bad guy, the reason kind of why we're talking about Michael Keaton is fantastic in this film. He's one of the strongest and I would say fiercest antagonists in the MCU. Every time he's on screen, he just absolutely dominates it and steals every scene he's in, including the scenes that he is in with Tom Holland. And it's really great to see him in a superhero film once again, but also be the villain this time as opposed to the hero. For me, this film is not perfect. I know a lot of people think it's the best Spider-Man movie ever. It's the best MCU movie, whatever they're saying. For me, it has a lot of problems when it comes to just the overall structure of the film. I thought was problematic, the way things were balanced in the film. I cared about certain things. I didn't care about a lot of other things. And for me, particularly, the overall genericness of the MCU is beginning to wane on me from a more personal perspective. The films feel all the same. They look all the same. And it's not that they're necessarily bad. They just kind of, they don't really pop, or they're not really wow me in any way. But I think it was a solid film for the MCU overall.
All right, Steven?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, just getting into the shortest way I can say it, I kind of have the exact same outlook as Andrew. I mean, I really liked the movie. It's really fun. I think Tom Holland is definitely the best Spider-Man. But I think that the issues that I do have, the small issues I have with it, because I gave this a pretty high rating, is that there's no real, the MCU just has a problem with individuality with their directors, other than probably James Gunn. James Gunn's the only one that's been able to put a stamp, and that's probably because his characters in his movies are the most unique, and they had never had anything done with him before then. So he's getting a lot of his own input in, and they've been successful, so they're going to continue to let him do it. But with Spider-Man, with this movie, I think it lacked it just lacked in individuality from the director. It just was very okay directed, and I think a lot of especially the action scenes, because, and this isn't a spoiler because they've talked about it in a lot of articles, but Spider-Man does not really go into spider sense in this film, and it kind of takes away from some of the possible great action, moments you had in some of the other Spider-Mans. They wanted to get away from it because they used it a lot in other Spider-Mans, but to me, it added a sense of being there with Spider-Man and him knowing when something's about to happen, and you feel the fear with him. But in the action scenes in this movie, a lot of times, there's a few good ones, but some of them they just gloss over them with a lot of big special effects, a lot of direction that's in your face, and you can't really see what's going on, and it's just it's not a lot of great direction in the movie. But the best things about the movie are the characters. And the interactions between the characters. And yes, Michael Keaton, fantastic in this movie. Like I said at the beginning, I love when he plays a kind of a bad guy. And there's just some really good moments in this movie with him, Spider-Man. And I mean, I still really love this movie. But I think, like Andrew, my issues with the movie are more the overall MCU as a whole, not just, I'm not just picking on Spider-Man. So I would definitely recommend going to see it. I'm seeing it again tomorrow with my dad. So, yeah, go see it.
Well, if you watched last week's show, our top 5 films of halfway through the year, you know how much I love Spider-Man Homecoming. I did not have the problems that these guys had with the film. I think the film is fantastic. I think it's one of the best MCU films. I think it's one of the best Spider-Man films. I think it's a great coming-of-age film. I think them capturing the whole John Hughes era, that worked. The villain is Michael Keaton as the Vulture. That worked. Spider-Man, there's comedy in here. There's so much good, funny moments. There's a great relationship between Peter Parker and his friend Ned, and also the butler, the driver, Iron Man's driver, played by Cabral. What's his name again?
Happy Hogan.
Happy Hogan. Why can't I not remember Happy Hogan for some reason?
How can you forget a guy's name Happy? I mean,
I know. Right? There's a great relationship with Peter Parker and Happy Hogan. I'll tell you what. I mean, there's some really great, like inside jokes with the whole genre of superhero films. There's some real good, what's the word I'm looking for? Twists. Some really good twists that I loved. And, you know, I'll tell you what, these kids all do a great job as Peter Parker's friends in the high school. The cameos with different villains are great. Marissa Tomei, I liked her a lot. I'll tell you what, I mean, they're going to have a hard time topping Spider-Man Homecoming when they do another Spider-Man movie, because this movie is so good. This is the first Spider-Man movie, and I probably enjoyed 2 out of the 5. Actually enjoyed 2 out of the 5, and they're both Tobey Maguire films. But this is the first time they actually capture the essence of what Peter Parker and Spider-Man is, in my opinion. And the reason why they all look alike is because they're all in the same universe, Andrew. They're supposed to look alike. They're not supposed to look like different films and different genres. DC movies all look alike because they're all in the same universe. All the Marvel movies all look alike because they're all in the same universe. And by bringing in Iron Man and some of these, they want you to understand that these characters exist in the same universe, so the world looks the same. So the films all have to have the same aesthetic, and they all have to look alike. And that's why they look alike. There's a reason for that. That's Kevin Feige. That's why they call him our Lord and Savior, Kevin Feige. The guy knows what he's doing. He knows how to make these films look seamless from one another. And that's the point of why they do it. Yeah, I love it. I think this film is phenomenal. And that's why it was number 1 on my list last week when I did my top 5 films halfway through the year. All right, getting back to Michael Keaton. Andrew, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is a film that you just mentioned before we went to the whole Spider-Man Homecoming thing, and that is Spotlight. This was kind of a resurgence. Well, this was part of the whole kind of recent Michael Keaton resurgence when he's really getting some great roles to work with. And like Dan said, this film deals with the whole cover-up with the Catholic Diocese in Boston of all of the priest improprieties that happened decades ago. And it's not just something that is local to just Boston. This was spread worldwide, but really it kind of all started with uncovering all of these things happening within the Boston Diocese decades ago, and then it just kind of spread. You know what I mean? This is kind of the epicenter of all of that. But yeah, this film is, like Dan said, more of an ensemble piece, but Michael Keaton does play a reporter who's working at the Boston Globe. The film also stars Mark Ruffalo, Rachel McAdams. Mark Ruffalo was actually nominated for an Oscar for this film. I think it's the only acting nomination from this film. And yes, it did win Best Picture, which was a surprise because I, like Dan said, I thought The Revenant was going to take it, especially as the Oscars unfolded that night. But yeah, Tom McCarthy, I think, is an underrated director. He has done films such as Win-Win, which is a great film, as well as The Visitor, and a much smaller film called The Station Agent, starring Peter Dinklage, and that is a fantastic film. Go out, seek that out, and watch that film. But yes, Michael Keaton is fantastic in this film. And like Dan, I am from very close to Boston. I'm about an hour outside of Boston. And at the end of this film, they list all of the towns and where the churches are, where all of the improprieties came in. And there was all the towns in my state, there's towns in southern New England, and it was just massive and widespread. And like Dan, I grew up going to Catholic Mass every Sunday. I'm a lapsed Catholic now. I'm actually an atheist now, so I'm not practicing at all. But the film still hit home because I know how deeply rooted the Catholic Church is, and just Christianity is in the culture in New England, specifically the Boston and Rhode Island area. It is so deeply rooted in this culture, and they touched on that in this film. So I thought it was a really good film, great performance by Michael Keaton.
Yeah, I'm glad somebody else on the panel had that. I mean, I just think it's a phenomenal film, and Michael Keaton. Steven and I coined the phrase, or I think Steven coined the phrase, Keaton-assance last week, because Michael Keaton is having a renaissance, just like Matthew McConaughey did. You know, you have the McConaissance, but you have the Keaton-assance. This guy, even in bad movies, he's been pretty good, you know. So, but this is one of the good movies, and he shines in Spotlight, absolutely. All right, Steven, what is your number 3?
My number 3 is another one that I was excited to talk about because this is, once again, another movie I watched a lot growing up. Still love watching it today. It's hilarious. It is called Multiplicity. Multiplicity. It's a film. It actually is directed by Harold Ramis, which is a late Harold Ramis, and this movie is about a guy who's just a average Joe dude. He's in construction. He just works all the time. His wife, Andie MacDowell, super hot in this movie, just taking care of everything, and he just needs to find some time. So he's doing a construction job one day, and he's working for this place that apparently clones people. And so he clones himself to free up time so he can spend more time with his family and do things. But then he decides he wants to clone himself again. And it gets out of control. I don't want to give away too much, but you should watch this movie. It has got a lot of hilarious moments in it. It's such a wacky movie. It's one of the movies that sounds dumb by its premise, but when you watch it and you see that there's like 4 Michael Keatons in one room and they all have different personalities, you're like, yeah, this guy's awesome. This is why Michael Keaton's the man, because he can play all these different types of people. He plays one that's a little bit more feminine, one that's kind of the workaholic, one that's kind of, mentally handicapped. It's a fantastic comedy. You have to check it out. It's great.
Yeah, this is in the era of Michael Keaton where he was doing some of his best comedy work of his career. He really started getting into the dramas and so forth. But early in his career, Multiplicity was one of those comedies that he just was in this zone where all these comedies were coming out in the early 80s and the mid to late 80s, and he just was knocking these films out of the park. It was like the go-to guy to do some of these quirky comedies, and Multiplicity was definitely one of those films, Steven. So good pick on your part, on your number 3. In that same vein, Steven, I'm going to go with the film very similar, not very similar, but in that comedy genre of Michael Keaton in the 80s, and it's a film that I saw in the theater when I was a kid, and I'll tell you what, I absolutely loved this film because you didn't see something like this before. You never saw the father be the mom. And in Mr. Mom, Michael Keaton was the mom because Terry Garr, Caroline, she got a big job and she went out and became the breadwinner, and he had to take care of the kids and change the diapers and get the kids ready for school and do all the things, be at the PTA meetings and do all the things that a mom would normally do. And it was really funny watching him do all this stuff that he never did before. And I'll tell you, Mr. Mom is such a fun, enjoyable film. It's a good family film too. There's not a lot of vulgar humor in it or cursing or anything like that. It's a film for all ages, and everybody, moms and dads and kids and grandpas and aunts, everybody could go see Mr. Mom and really enjoy this film and get a good laugh out of it, because to see the people that were the moms and see the dads taking over for the moms, And Mr. Mom came out in 1983, and Michael Keaton plays Jack, the father, and it also has Terry Garr and Martin Mull and Jeffrey Tambor and Christopher Lloyd in it. And it's directed by, Stan Dragotti. Stan Dragotti is the guy's name that directed it. But it's a fun film. If you really want to see Michael Keaton's comedy stuff of the early 80s, kind of in a way like Tom Hanks, where he started doing all these dramas in the 90s, late 90s, and then boom, he became this big-time drama actor. But he had a phenomenal career doing comedies, and so did Michael Keaton. So go back and look at some of these Multiplicity, Mr. Mom. Some of these films are really enjoyable films. And, of course, they're dated to the time, so you're going to get a laugh out of some of things that go on because it's in the 80s, you know? I mean, we're 30 years away from that. You know, Michael Keaton's been acting that long. It doesn't seem like it, but he's had such a long, long career. All right, so that's our number threes. Going to number two now with Andrew.
My number two is a film that Steven already mentioned, and that is Batman, 1989. The introduction of Michael Keaton for me in my life was this movie. It was also the introduction of Batman, the character, to a lot of people. When I was a kid, Batman was Michael Keaton, and he was Adam West, and he was the voice of Kevin Conroy from Batman the Animated Series. But I remember as a kid, I had the poster of this movie on the wall, on my wall, and this is a film I've seen many, many times. You have Jack Nicholson playing the Joker, which is basically just Jack Nicholson going crazy on screen. But like Stevens has already mentioned, Michael Keaton, for many people, is their Batman. And for me, he was the Batman of my youth, but not the Batman of my adulthood, if that makes any poetic sense. It's really tough to define who your Batman is, or who you prefer as Batman. The great thing about Batman is he's a character that has kind of been everything, so you can choose whichever version of him that you like. But this film, directed by Tim Burton, really gave the genre a foundational film where people had to now take it seriously as a movie. You know what I mean? It wasn't it wasn't just for kids anymore. This was a movie that could appeal to multiple generations, adults, children, whatever. And I have always had a soft spot for this film. It's not a film that holds up for a lot of people, but for me, there's a lot of nostalgia built in with it. So I've always liked it. And Michael Keaton, to this day, still says that he's Batman, which is kind of a cool thing. You know what I mean? There was a Batman Returns, a sequel film that I don't think is quite as good as this one. That's a different discussion for a different time. But yeah, this is an iconic role. This was definitely Michael Keaton changing the perception of who he was as an actor. We've already talked about his early comedy films as well as other comedy films he's done, but that was where he got his start, and Batman changed his career.
Absolutely, Andrew. All right, Steven, what is your number two?
My number two is one that I really just I remember seeing this movie and just being blown away by it. Went back and saw it multiple times in the theaters. It's part of his Keaton-essence, and that is Birdman. Birdman, the dude, I mean, for me, the dude should have won the Oscar that year. I know Matthew McConaughey was just, he had to win. But I thought Keaton was just on fire in this movie. And
excuse me.
What?
It was Eddie Redmayne, Theory of the
well, then that just proves my point even more. Keaton should have definitely won this year. I'm sorry, but as good as Eddie Redmayne was, that movie wasn't that great. It was okay. And that should be taken in consideration a little bit. Yeah, I mean, Keaton was just, I mean, when the first scene is him floating in the air, and then he says, "This place smells like balls," that's pure cinema right there. This place smells like balls. Yeah, that's it's fantastic. And then, of course, Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu directs the hell out of this movie. It's some of the best cinematography. You had other people that were nominated also. You had Emma Stone. I think Edward Norton was also nominated, I think. Yeah. And it's just all around just a great film. But Keaton, obviously, it's his movie. And it's just, my favorite scene is the scene where Emma Stone is just tearing him down, telling him his nothing. And just the look on his face when you finally look back at Keaton, you can just see how hurt he is. And it's just heartbreak. It made me tear up. He's just so good in this movie. Birdman, my number two.
Yeah, I'll tell you. There's this scene in Birdman where he gets locked out of the theater and he's like walking around outside in his underwear. That scene is so funny. I love that scene. But then there's a scene with him and Zach Galifianakis that's really funny. And you hit the nail on the head with the cinematography. You know, it was like a gimmick in a way. It was that year we had some gimmick films that year. We had about 2 or 3 or 4 different gimmick films that year, and the gimmick was that it was all one continuous long shot, and that is what oppressed a lot of people with Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu. But I think you're right, Stephen, with the tragedy that how does Iñárritu get 3 Oscars? And Michael Keaton can't even get 1 that year. I mean, come on. I mean, doesn't Michael Keaton deserve 1 of those 3 Oscars? I mean, Jesus Christ. What the heck were they thinking that year, you know? I mean, come on.
I mean, look, I mean, Eddie Redmayne's a fine actor, but I'm sorry, we've had other actors play. It's like if you play a true life person that has some kind of disability, you're like guaranteed an Oscar almost every time.
Well, ugly. It's the uglying down syndrome. When you take a character that's a beautiful, good-looking guy like Eddie Redmayne, and you do the physical acting of a person that has the problems of Stephen Hawking, that's why they gave him the Oscar.
Like Daniel Day-Lewis in My Left Foot.
Yes, and Ron and Monster, you know, movies like that, when you ugly yourself down and do that kind of physical acting that makes you look, act, and seem like the person that you're portraying. And that's why I think he got it. And like, look, I'm not the biggest supporter of Birdman, but I understand where you're coming from, Stephen. I think if you're going to give 3 to Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu, don't you think Keaton should have got 1 somehow? You know, I mean, I don't think they dispersed the Oscars very well that year. But let's get into my number 2, and it's the same one as Andrew's number 2, and I believe it was Stephen's number 4, Batman. I grew up with this Batman. This was my Batman growing up as a kid. I was probably 13 years old, and everybody and their brother were like, oh my God, we're getting to see Batman on the big screen. It's freaking amazing. At the time, we didn't care who the hell was playing Batman. You're 13 years old. You're getting to see the Joker. You're getting to see Batman. You're getting to see the Batmobile, and you're getting to see all this crazy sets and something I had a feeling you guys wouldn't bring it up, but one of the fun parts about the movie is the music by Prince. That really gets you into the film. I mean, he, R.I.P. rest in peace, Prince, but his music was iconic back in the 80s, and one of the reasons why is his songs in Batman and some of these films. And Kim Basinger, Oscar winner, she plays Vicky Vale, fantastic love interest for Michael Keaton in the film. Billy D. Williams is in there. Robert Wall. I mean, there's some really good acting in the film, but it is a fun film. Of course, Jack Nicholson is Jack Napier / the Joker. He is phenomenal. I mean, Heath Ledger is different. Christian Bale is different. This is a Batman for a different era, for the campy kind of fun era that the movie came out in. It was a great movie, in my opinion. Of course, like Superman, like Batman doesn't stand up to today's standards. But it doesn't mean Superman 1 and Superman 2 and Batman aren't great films, because they are for the time that they came out. And I mean, I'd be a complete idiot if I didn't have Batman on my top 5 Michael Keaton performances, because he's fantastic in the film. And Steven said one of the most famous quotes, of course, and I love the one where the guy's like, "Who are you?" "I'm the Batman." Some of that stuff is cool. When you're 13 years old, I mean, you're like, you gotta love this stuff. You can't go wrong with Batman. I mean, back in the day. So, and there's a theme here. We've got a lot of his older material, but we got a few of his newer stuff too. So it tells you the gap where Michael Keaton really didn't do a whole lot between the 80s and today, the last 2 or 3 years. But both Andrew and Steven did say something in the late 90s, which is surprising to me. All right, so I'm going to call audible here real quick. We're going to do a topic, different topic. So because we weren't able to do that topic, just because Michael Keaton played the Vulture, what the heck? Steven, tell me a Spider-Man villain you'd like to see in a future Spider-Man film. that you think maybe an actor that you'd like to portray this villain, something that could fit into some of the storylines that would make sense in your opinion?
Well, if I'm saying one, I'm going to go with Kraven the Hunter, just because Kraven the Hunter has been a story I've always wanted to see. And to me, you know, with what they're talking about with the future, you know, the other movies are going to do with the MCU, they said that basically you're going to get more of the lower key villains and probably not a lot of the big time villains. Sony's going to hold on to them. They're not going to share their big toys. But Kraven the Hunter is kind of a big toy. He's one that people know of. He's even in the animated series. And, you know, if I had an actor in mind off the top of my head, you know, maybe if Russell Crowe would get in shape again, I could see Russell Crowe doing it. He seems to be all about big budget movies nowadays. Other than that, you know, there's a lot of great actors that could take on that role. I feel like just don't put The Rock in the role, just because you know he's big. And
what do you think about Gerard Butler as Kraven the Hunter?
No, I want a better actor. I'm sorry, he's not that great of an actor. Maybe how about we go? I mean, is Kraven the Hunter's not a white dude, is he? He's like a
guy from Australia.
Yeah, he's Australian. So Mel Gibson.
Yeah, maybe Mel Gibson. Oh man, Mel Gibson. Yeah, or Russell Crowe. That wouldn't be bad. Or what's his name?
Liam Hemsworth.
No. What's his face? The guy from. Oh man. No, I can't.
You got to do a search. You got to do a search like Andrew.
No. He was in the Shack this year.
Oh, Ray Stevenson, or not Ray Stevenson, but the dude from Avatar.
Yeah.
That guy. No, I don't like him.
Okay, all right. You got a villain. You want to see be in a movie since we got the Vulture. We've already had Hancock. We've had Green Goblin twice. We've had Sandman. I actually thought Thomas Hayden Church was good as Sandman. We've got the Lizard, and we've got Electro. So we've got pretty much the entire Sinister Six.
Yeah, I mean, I've always wanted to see Carnage. I've actually always wanted to see Venom, but since we already got a Venom, I'm going to choose Carnage. I've always wanted to see Carnage take on Spider-Man. I think Venom and Carnage are his two bigger adversaries. Some people, two people who could really give him a run for his money. And Carnage is an even more dark and twisted symbiote than Venom is. And for an actor, it would be, I would thinking Jake Gyllenhaal, just because I know he can get that crazy. He could go that crazy.
Nightcrawler crazy.
Yeah, the Nightcrawler crazy, but you take the Nightcrawler craziness and turn it from like news gathering and stuff like that to like serial killerness. You got like a Hannibal Lecter type level of insanity here. You know what I mean? But just even more wild. So that's something I want to see. I don't think it's gonna happen necessarily, but
Gotham. What about the kid from Gotham? They played like the faux Joker guy.
Yeah, I think he's too young. Not Dominic Monaghan, but I think he's too young. I almost want like a more adult serial killer than like
you want a clean cut dude. You just want somebody that's a little older, maybe like the dude from Michael H. Hall, or
Michael C. Hall. I mean Dexter
C. Hall, you know,
Dexter, who was a serial killer as well, and he was also crazy. I mean, maybe someone like Ben Foster, who's a great actor.
Ben Foster's great,
but like he's never really given big roles. Give him a big role. I mean, take a shot, take a chance.
Sam Rockwell.
That's another one. Although he's already technically in the MCU.
Yeah, he is. You're right.
Yeah, I'd like to see because you're in New York. You're dealing with like Broadway. You're dealing with show business. Maybe you get a disgruntled guy that is in show business or in like a carnival or something like that. Maybe he turns into Mysterio, and then you can get like he creates some fake villains that aren't actually there, but we get to see some villains like some of the older villains that we got in some of our other movies, like Sandman and Electro and Lizard and some of these characters with new actors portraying these villains, but they're not actually there. They're created by Mysterio in his fantasy world of being a showman, and they're ghosts or something like that or whatever, or they're figment of Spider-Man's imagination because he drugs them and makes him go through all this like gauntlet of super villains or something like that. But I've always liked Mysterio, and I even the comics never could do Mysterio right because he has a fishbowl in his head and he wears a cape. So it seems like such a campy, goofy character. But I would love to see something like that, a Mysterio. And honestly, I could, maybe like a Steve Carell playing Mysterio, because he has that bigger than life personality. He could be like a disgruntled showman in like, or even maybe a Christoph Waltz, who's like a showman. He played a ringleader in Water for Elephants. He's played all kinds of different villains. He can do different languages. He can be a bigger than life type of character. So maybe he could be like a playwright or a director of some kind of thing in New York, and he gets fired because he does a crappy play or a crappy Broadway production or some crap. I'd love to see Christoph Waltz in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in some way. So I go with Mysterio. So that's just kind of, we're having fun with this, because we're going to kind of do a top 5 last week about this, but I changed it up to Michael Keaton instead. So I figure let's see what we can come up with real quick. All right, everybody, let's go back to number 1. Andrew, what is your number 1?
My number 1 is a film that has already been mentioned by Steven, and that is Birdman, or as the other title is called, The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance. And this film is, like Steven said, directed just superbly by Inarritu, shot just amazingly by Lubeski. The score, the screenplay is incredible. I mean, this film, when I saw it in theaters, I was just amazed that you could pull off a film like this, make it seem as if it's just one continuous shot. Granted, if you play really close attention, you can see where they would like do certain edits or do certain cuts. There would be like, the camera would stay on one specific area for a while, stuff like that. But the acting, especially by Michael Keaton, is incredible in this film. He's given such amazing dialogue to work with, some of the best dialogue I think he's ever had to work with. And the film feels like a play and is centered around the production of a play, coincidentally. And there's just so much happening in this film that you're not quite sure what is real, what is a dream, what is this even a real reality that Michael Keaton and these characters are living in. And it is just incredible. I was just floored by this film, and this was a film that did win Best Picture. It won, I believe, 4 Oscars. And yeah, I really wish Michael Keaton had won the Oscar for this role. I mean, this was the best role that I think he's ever had in terms of just laying it all out on the line when it comes to his acting ability. And I'm still rather upset by that, you know what I mean? But yeah, this is a great film. I could talk about this film ad nauseum. I know a lot of people think it's overrated. I don't. I think it's amazing.
Hey, absolutely. There's a reason why you guys are on this show. Not because I couldn't find anybody else, but I know you guys know what the hell you're talking about, and you guys have opinions, and there's a reason why your opinions matter, is because you know what the hell you're talking about. And so if you guys choose Birdman and you guys put that on your, obviously you guys have an opinion about the film that is valid to put, and it's Michael Keaton's only Oscar nomination, so it's obviously a great performance in a great film. So there's a reason why a lot of people like yourselves love Birdman. All right, Steven, what is your number 1?
Well, I don't know that this will be a surprise. There's really one left that really needs to be talked about here, guys. And Andrew, how is this not on your list? This is crazy. How is Beetlejuice not somewhere on your list?
You know what?
Showtime. It's showtime. Guys, Beetlejuice is still, even though I will sit here and say Birdman is probably his best performance, Beetlejuice is his most iconic performance. Beetlejuice is still a Halloween costume that everybody wears today. It still lives in our zeitgeist of pop culture today. That's how popular this role is for him. Of course, a lot of that credit can go to Tim Burton's vision, but this is just such a cool character. I've wanted to see Beetlejuice. I mean, I don't know if I like the idea of a sequel to this movie, but I just really want to see Beetlejuice with Michael Keaton back again in something. He needs to pop up in a superhero movie. He needs to be the villain of a superhero. Like, it needs to be Beetlejuice versus the Ninja Turtles, or Beetlejuice versus, like, Superman or something. We just need Beetlejuice back in something. If you don't know this story, basically it's about this lovely couple. You have Gina Davis and you have Alec Baldwin, and they're this lovely couple that lives on the top of this hill in this small town. They both die, and now they're in the afterlife, and they're dealing. Basically, you're on the journey with them as they're going into the afterlife, and they're stuck in their home. And then eventually they become across Michael Keaton's Beetlejuice, who is this demon ghost guy that just kind of really just wants to cause anarchy. He's like the dead Joker in a way. Just maybe not as mean. You can kind of get along with Beetlejuice as long as you're okay with having a little, like a dirty grandpa that's just like messing around and causing chaos a little bit. But in a way, he's another one of them characters. It's kind of a bad guy, but he's kind of a good guy. Like he plays both sides a little bit, and it's just such a great character. He's so hilarious. The makeup work is fantastic. Beetlejuice is my #1 Michael Keaton film.
Yeah, I'm shocked Andrew did not have Beetlejuice on his list as well. Mine is the exact same as Steven's. #1 is Beetlejuice. I grew up with Beetlejuice. I grew up with Batman. I'll tell you what, I absolutely love this film. I don't know what else I could say besides what Steven just said. It's got, Winona Ryder. It's got Alec Baldwin. It's got Gina Davis. It's directed by Tim Burton. If you love Tim Burton, his quirky kind of Edward Scissorhands, Ed Wood, even the films he produced, Nightmare Before Christmas, Corpse Bride directed, frankly, they all have this kind of aesthetic to them, this dark and dreary kind of campiness to them, but it's a fun kind of way. You don't see a lot of directors that have films that have this kind of aesthetic to them, and that's kind of in a way that makes these films fun. Beetlejuice is a fun film. If you can't enjoy Beetlejuice, I mean, I don't know what else I can tell you. Michael Keaton is fantastic. This is one of his iconic, if not the most iconic role in his entire career. This film, and he's so funny, and just, I mean, everybody loves this film that I grew up with. I mean, people that grew up with me in the time that I grew up in the 80s and early 90s, this is a film that everybody watched. Everybody's seen it. It's one of those go-tos that you say, oh, Michael Keaton, oh, Beetlejuice, oh, the 80s, Beetlejuice. That's one of the iconic films of the 80s that people can think of. And Michael Keaton is just fantastic as the character. And I would love to see, they've been bandying around a talk of a sequel with Tim Burton and Michael Keaton, but then one week they'd say, oh, they're not going to do it. The next week they say, oh, they are going to do it. So we don't know. Maybe maybe him being involved with Dumbo might kind of get, if there's some popularity behind Dumbo, if they get things rolling, they make some money, maybe we could end up with a Beetlejuice 2 somehow. What kind of story they could do or whatever, who knows? I mean, it's kind of one of those films that has like an ending to it. But Beetlejuice he's in hell, so anybody could get sent to hell and run into Beetlejuice, and you just don't want to say his name, Is that the one where you're supposed to say Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice? You don't want to say Beetlejuice, 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 because that's not good, because Beetlejuice will appear, and then you're going to have to deal with Beetlejuice. But I love Beetlejuice. I mean, what more can I say? Steven pretty much said it all when he talked about the film. But that is my #1. What'd you say, Steven?
It's showtime.
It's showtime. I love he has some great quotes too, in all his.
I didn't say it, but my favorite scene is the scene where he's trying to convince him, like the couple to hang out with him, or to do whatever. And he's like trying to convince him, and then he's like jumps around, he like goes around the corner, and he's like wearing the same outfit as Alec Baldwin. He's like, hey, look, we shop at the same store. Hey, I love that. Just like the comedy is fantastic.
Yeah, you're absolutely. I mean, it's just such a fun film, and I don't know how the heck they could capture the same magic again. 30-something years later. It's been 30. Next year will be 30 years to the year that Beetlejuice came out, and trust me, I was 13 years old when Beetlejuice came out, so I remember 13, 14 years old. So that tells you how old I am. But anybody got any honorable mentions?
I mean, just the few that I left off. I mean, I've seen Mr. Mom. Mr. Mom is a fun family film. He's got one movie. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but it's called Clean and Sober. It's a very interesting. It's actually a pretty good performance by him, where he plays a guy that's it's in the title. He's this guy that's he's into drinking and whatever. He tries to get himself sober or whatnot. And it's kind of like a comedy drama type of movie. It's a pretty good movie. Other than that, I mean, there's some other side movies, but I'll let you guys get in on that.
Andrew, you got any honorable mentions?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people like Batman Returns, but he's good in the movie. His chemistry with Michelle Pfeiffer, I think, is great. The movie overall is like Tim Burton on acid. But What You Do About Nothing, which I believe is done by Kenneth Branagh, is based on the Shakespeare play. He's in that. That's a huge ensemble cast. So yeah, those are two. And yeah, Beetlejuice. I grew up watching Beetlejuice too, as well. And I knew everybody's gonna have Beetlejuice on their list. Everybody has Beetlejuice on their list, and I left it off just because I know you guys want to talk about it. I knew it. I mean, it's an iconic role. I mean, I grew up watching that. I grew up watching the animated TV series as well. So yeah, Beetlejuice is of course iconic. So that would probably be on everyone's list, of course.
Yeah.
All
right. Dan, we will give you a pass, Andrew, since Steven and I did talk about it. I got a little film called Johnny Dangerously, where he kind of lucks into playing a gangster. I mean, he kind of gets. He's not a gangster, but he gets these people to believe that he's this gangster, and he has to live up to being this gangster. And it's called Johnny Dangerously. It is a fun film. It takes place like in period, like in the 50s or something like that, whatever. And it's a comedy. This is in that era of comedy that Michael Keaton, he was on a roll in the 80s. I mean, it was just Mr. Mom, Johnny Danger, Johnny Mnemonic. I mean, Multiplicity. Beetlejuice. He had so many cool Nightshift. So many good movies that, it dawned on me this morning that we should do Michael Keaton, and I'm glad we got a chance to do Michael Keaton. And in a couple bad movies, RoboCop and Need for Speed, he's actually pretty decent in those two films. So if you want to see Michael Keaton in a couple not great films, RoboCop, the reboot, and Need for Speed, he's actually not bad in those two films. So Andrew, where can you be found?
You can find me on Twitter at Cabzilla06, as well as my YouTube channel, Cabzilla Productions.
And Steven?
You can find me on Film Club Central doing a bunch of different stuff. And actually, if you pay attention to Facebook tomorrow night, my channel is doing its first time back, our news show, Lights, Camera, News. And we're going to have Dan Skip Allen as a guest on that episode with me and Carl Champion Jr. talking the last week's worth of news. And it's going to become a weekly thing. So you'll see Andrew, popping in on there too. I got him coming in. We got Mark Tordai is on the list of people to come in. We're going to try to get as many different people on that show. So watch out for that.
Look forward to that tomorrow night, Steven. You can find me at Dan Skip Allen on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. Also, I do a podcast with my co-host, Vinny and Spada. Episode 68 is on the channel right now, the Best Damn Movie Show YouTube channel. Right here, where if you're watching this, you're watching that channel. Also, a very special 4th of July episode of the 52 Must-See Movies and why they matter with Mr. Steven Billings right there, where we get to go to Amity Island and discuss why Jaws is an essential viewing for everybody on this past 4th of July weekend. If you didn't get the chance to watch it over the 4th of July week, which I wish people would have watched it over that time, because it follows right in on 4th of July. Just watch that episode. We really go in depth on talking about Jaws, which is a phenomenal, phenomenal film. So, so for these guys, good night.